The U.S. Virgin Islands, officially the Virgin Islands of the United States, are a group of islands in the Caribbean that are an insular area of the United States. The islands are geographically part of the Virgin Islands archipelago and are located in the Leeward Islands of the Lesser Antilles. The U.S. Virgin Islands consist of the main islands of St. Croix, St. John, and St. Thomas, and many other surrounding minor islands. The total land area of the territory is 133.73 square miles. The territory's capital is Charlotte Amalia on the island of St. Thomas. In 2010 the population was 106,405, and mostly Afro-Caribbean. Tourism is the primary economic activity, although there is a significant rum manufacturing sector. Farming is done on a relatively smaller scale on the island of St. Croix, although it has seen a slow revival in recent years. Previously the Danish West Indies of the Kingdom of Denmark, Norway. They were sold to the United States by Denmark in the Treaty of the Danish West Indies of 1916. They are classified by the UN as a non-self-governing territory, and are currently an organized, unincorporated United States territory. The U.S. Virgin Islands are organized under the 1954 Revised Organic Act of the Virgin Islands and have since held 5 constitutional conventions. The last and only proposed constitution, adopted by the 5th Constitutional Convention in 2009, was rejected by the U.S. Congress in 2010, which urged the convention to reconvene to address the concerns Congress and the Obama administration had with the proposed document. The convention reconvened in October 2012 to address these concerns, but was not able to produce a revised constitution before its October 31 deadline. History. The U.S. Virgin Islands were originally inhabited by the Saboni, Carib, and Arawakes. The islands were named by Christopher Columbus on his second voyage in 1493 for St. Ursula and her virgin followers. Over the next 200 years, the islands were held by many European powers, including Spain, Great Britain, the Netherlands, France, and Denmark, Norway. The Danish West India Company settled on St. Thomas in 1672, settled on St. John in 1694, and purchased St. Croix from France in 1733. The islands became royal Danish colonies in 1754, named the Danish West Indian Islands. Sugarcane, produced by slave labor, drove the island's economy during the 18th and early 19th centuries, until the abolition of slavery by Governor Peter von Schalten on July 3, 1848. The Danish West India and Guinea Company represented the first Europeans to settle the Virgin Islands. They are also credited with naming the island St. John. The Danish crown took full control of St. John in 1754, along with St. Thomas and St. Croix. Sugarcane plantations such as the famous Annaberg sugar plantation were established in great numbers on St. John because of the intense heat and fertile terrain which provided ideal growing conditions. The establishment of sugarcane plantations also led to the buying of more slaves from their chiefs in Africa. St. John was the site of one of the first significant slave rebellions in the New World in 1733, when Aquamu slaves from the Gold Coast took over the island for 6 months. The Danish were able to defeat the enslaved Africans with help from the French in Martinique. Instead of allowing themselves to be recaptured, more than a dozen of the ringleaders shot themselves before the French forces could capture them and call them to account for their activities during the period of rebel control. It is estimated that by 1775, slaves outnumbered the Danish settlers by a ratio of 5 to 1. The indigenous Caribs and Arawakes were also used as slave labor to the point of the entire native population being absorbed into the larger groups. Slavery was abolished in the Virgin Islands on July 3, 1848. For the remainder of the period of Danish rule, the islands were not economically viable, and significant transfers were made from the Danish state budgets to the authorities in the islands. In 1867, a treaty to sell St. Thomas and St. John to the United States was agreed, but the sale was never effected. A number of reforms aimed at reviving the island's economy were attempted, but none had great success. A second draft treaty to sell the islands to the United States was negotiated in 1902, but was defeated in the upper house of the Danish parliament, in a balanced ballot. The onset of World War I brought the reforms to a close and again left the islands isolated and exposed. During the submarine warfare phases of the First World War, the United States, fearing that the islands might be seized by Germany as a submarine base, again approached Denmark about buying them. After a few months of negotiations, a selling price of $25 million in United States gold coin was agreed. At the same time, the economics of continued possession weighed heavily on the minds of Danish decision-makers, and a consensus in favor of selling emerged in the Danish parliament. The Treaty of the Danish West Indies was signed in August 1916, with the Danish referendum held in December 1916 to confirm the decision. The deal was finalized on January 17, 1917, when the United States and Denmark exchanged the respective treaty ratifications. The United States took possession of the islands on March 31, 1917, and the territory was renamed the Virgin Islands of the United States. Every year, Transfer Day is recognized as a holiday to commemorate the acquisition of the islands by the United States. U.S. citizenship was granted to the inhabitants of the islands in 1927. Water Island, a small island to the south of St. Thomas, was initially administered by the U.S. federal government and did not become a part of the U.S. Virgin Islands territory until 1996, when 50 acres of land was transferred to the territorial government. The remaining 200 acres of the island were purchased from the U.S. Department of the Interior in May 2005 for $10, a transaction which marked the official change in jurisdiction. Hurricane Hugo struck the U.S. Virgin Islands in 1989, causing catastrophic physical and economic damage. The territory was again struck by Hurricane Marilyn in 1995, killing 8 people and causing more than $2 billion in damage. The islands were again struck by Hurricanes Bertha, George, Lenny, and Omar in 1996, 1998, 1999, and 2008 respectively, but damage was not as severe in those storms. Geography. The U.S. Virgin Islands are in the Atlantic Ocean, about 40 miles east of Puerto Rico and immediately west of the British Virgin Islands. They share the Virgin Islands archipelago with the Puerto Rican Virgin Islands of Vieques and Culebra and the British Virgin Islands. The territory consists of 3 main islands, St. Thomas, St. John, and St. Croix, as well as several dozen smaller islands. The main islands have nicknames often used by locals: Twin City, Rock City, and Love City. The combined land area of the islands is roughly twice the size of Washington, D.C. The U.S. Virgin Islands are known for the white sand beaches, including Magen's Bay and Trunk Bay, and strategic harbors, including Charlotte Amalia and Christiansted. Most of the islands, including St. Thomas, are volcanic in origin and hilly. The highest point is Crown Mountain, St. Thomas. St. Croix, the largest of the U.S. Virgin Islands, lies to the south and has a flatter terrain. The National Park Service owns more than half of St. John, nearly all of Hassel Island, and many acres of coral reef. The U.S. Virgin Islands lie on the boundary of the North American Plate and the Caribbean Plate. Natural hazards include earthquakes and tropical cyclones. Climate: the United States Virgin Islands enjoy a tropical climate, with little seasonal change throughout the year. Rainfall is concentrated in the high sun period, while in the winter the northeast trade winds prevail. Summer and winter high temperatures differ by 5 degrees Fahrenheit or less on average. Politics and government: the U.S. Virgin Islands are an organized, unincorporated United States territory. Even though they are U.S. citizens, U.S. Virgin Islands residents cannot vote in presidential elections. U.S. Virgin Islands residents are able to vote in presidential primary elections for delegates to the Democratic National Convention and the Republican National Convention. Unlike persons born on the mainland and naturalized citizens who derive the citizenship from the 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, those born in the U.S. Virgin Islands derive the U.S. citizenship from congressional statute. The main political parties in the U.S. Virgin Islands are the Democratic Party of the Virgin Islands, the Independent Citizens Movement, and the Republican Party of the Virgin Islands. Additional candidates run as independents. At the national level, the U.S. Virgin Islands elect a delegate to Congress from their at-large congressional district. The elected delegate, while able to vote in committee, cannot participate in floor votes. The current House of Representatives delegate is Stacey Plaskett. At the territorial level, 15 senators, 7 from the District of St. Croix, 7 from the District of St. Thomas and St. John, and 1 senator at large who must be a resident of St. John, are elected for 2-year terms to the unicameral Virgin Islands legislature. The U.S. Virgin Islands have elected a territorial governor every 4 years since 1970. Previous governors were appointed by the President of the United States. The U.S. Virgin Islands have a District Court, Superior Court, and the Supreme Court. The District Court is responsible for federal law, while the Superior Court is responsible for U.S. Virgin Islands law at the trial level, and the Supreme Court is responsible for appeals from the Superior Court for all appeals filed on or after January 29, 2007. Appeals filed prior to that date are heard by the Appellate Division of the District Court. Appeals from the Federal District Court are heard by the United States Court of Appeals for the Third Circuit, located in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. District Court judges are appointed by the President, while Superior Court and Supreme Court judges are appointed by the Governor. On October 21, 1976, President Gerald Ford signed Pub. L. 94-580 for authorizing the people of the United States Virgin Islands to organize a government pursuant to a constitution, which would be automatically approved if Congress did not act within 60 days. On May 26, 2009, the U.S. Virgin Islands' Fifth Constitutional Convention adopted a proposed Constitution of the Virgin Islands, which was submitted by President Barack Obama to Congress on March 1, 2010. On June 30, 2010, President Obama signed Pub. L. 111-194, in which Congress urged the Constitutional Convention to reconvene. Administrative divisions. Administratively, the U.S. Virgin Islands are divided into 3 districts and 20 sub-districts. While a Danish possession, the islands were divided into quarters, which were further divided into many dozens of estates. Estate names are still used to write addresses. Estates and quarters are used in describing real estate, especially on St. John and St. Croix. More densely populated towns such as Frederiksted and Christiansted on St. Khoi were historically referred to as districts, in contrast to the surrounding plantation land. Self-determination. A 1993 referendum on status attracted only 31.4% turnout, and so its results were considered void. No further referenda have been scheduled since. In 2004, the 25th legislature of the Virgin Islands established the Fifth Constitutional Convention. A constitutional convention gathered in order to draft a new constitution. In June 2009, Governor John De Jong, Jr. rejected the resulting constitutional draft, saying the document did violate federal law, fail to defer to federal sovereignty, and disregard basic civil rights. A lawsuit filed by members of the convention to force Governor De Jong to forward the document to President Barack Obama was ultimately successful. The President of the United States forwarded the proposal to Congress, which then had 60 days to approve or reject the document, in May 2010, along with a report noting concerns raised by the U.S. Department of Justice and restating the issues noted by Governor De Jong. A U.S. congressional resolution disapproving of the proposed constitution and requesting that the Fifth Constitutional Convention reconvene to consider changes to address these issues was signed into law by President Obama on June 30, 2010. Months later, a federal lawsuit was filed in the Federal District Court of the Virgin Islands in 2011. The lawsuit claimed that the United States had to provide U.S.Virgin Islanders with the ability to be represented in Congress and vote for U.S. President. The case is Civil No. 311 CV 110, Charles v. U.S. Federal Elections Commission al. It alleged that racial discrimination present in an all-white and segregated U.S. Congress of 1917 was the impetus to deny the right to vote to a majority non-white constituency. The case was ultimately dismissed and closed on August 16, 2012 by District Judge Ann E. Thompson from the Federal District Court of the Virgin Islands, Division of St. Croix. Economy. Tourism is the primary economic activity. The islands normally host 2 million visitors a year, many of whom visit on cruise ships. Additionally, the islands frequently are a starting point for private yacht charters to the neighboring British Virgin Islands. The manufacturing sector consists of mainly rum distilling. The agricultural sector is small, with most food being imported. International business and financial services are a small but growing component of the economy. Most energy is also generated from imported oil, leading to electricity costs 4 to 5 times higher than the U.S. mainland. The Virgin Islands Water and Power Authority also uses imported energy to operate its desalination facilities to provide fresh water. Until February 2012, the Hovens, a plant located on St. Croix, was one of the world's largest petroleum refineries and contributed about 20% of the territory's GDP. It has since been largely shut down and is now operating as no more than an oil storage facility, provoking a local economic crisis. The U.S. Virgin Islands are located in the Atlantic Standard Time Zone and do not participate in daylight saving time. When the mainland United States is on Standard Time, the U.S. Virgin Islands are 1 hour ahead of Eastern Standard Time. When the mainland United States is on Daylight Saving Time, Eastern Daylight Time is the same as Atlantic Standard Time. To draw more technology-focused companies and expand this segment of the economy, the government founded and launched University of the Virgin Islands Research and Technology Park in conjunction with private businesses and the University of the Virgin Islands. The U.S. Virgin Islands are an independent customs territory from the mainland United States and operate largely as a free port. U.S. citizens thus do not have to clear customs when arriving in the U.S. Virgin Islands, but do when traveling to the mainland. Local residents are not subject to U.S. federal income taxes on U.S. Virgin Islands source income. They pay taxes to the territory equal to what the federal taxes would be if they lived in a state. Transportation and communications. The Henry E. Rolson International Airport serves St. Croix, and the Cyril E. King International Airport serves St. Thomas and St. John. The U.S. Virgin Islands is the only U.S. jurisdiction which drives on the left. This was inherited from what was then current practice on the islands at the time of the 1917 transfer to limit losses of livestock. As most cars being imported from the mainland United States are left-hand drive, the driver sits at the outside of the road, raising traffic safety issues. As in other U.S. territories, U.S. Virgin Islands mail service is handled by the United States Postal Service, using the two-character state code VI for domestic mail delivery. Zip codes are in the 008XX range. As of January 2010, specifically assigned codes include 00801, 00805, 00820, 00824, 00830, 00831, 00840, 00841, and 00850, 00851. The islands are part of the North American Numbering Plan, using area code 340, and island residents and visitors are able to call toll-free U.S. numbers. Society. Demographics. In 2010, the U.S. Virgin Islands had a population of 106,405. There are 40,648 households, and 26,636 families. In 2010 there were 40,648 households, out of which 34.7% had children under the age of 18 living with them. 33.2% were married couples living together. 24.9% had a female householder with no husband present, and 34.5% were non-families. 30.2% of all households were made up of individuals, and 6.3% had someone living alone who was 65 years of age or older. The average household size was 2.64, and the average family size was 3.34. In the territory, the population was spread out, with 31.6% under the age of 18, 8.0% from 18 to 24, 27.1% from 25 to 44, 24.9% from 45 to 64, and 8.4% who were 65 years of age or older. The median age was 33 years. For every 100 females there were 91.4 males. For every 100 females ages 18 and up, there were 87.7 males. The annual population growth is -0.12%. The median income for a household in the territory was $24,704, and the median income for a family was $28,553. Males had a median income of $28,309 versus $22,601 for females. The per capita income for the territory was $13,139. About 28.7% of families and 32.5% of the population were below the poverty line, including 41.7% of those less than 18 years old and 29.8% of those 65 or more years old. Ethnic groups. The racial makeup of the U.S. Virgin Islands was black or Afro-Caribbean, 76.0%, white, 15.6%, Asian, 1.4%, mixed, 2.1%, other, 4.5%, Hispanic or Latino of any race, 17.4%. Many residents can trace their ancestry to other Caribbean islands, especially Puerto Rico and the Lesser Antilles. The territory is largely Afro-Caribbean in origin. Languages. English is currently the dominant language and has been the official language since 1917, when the islands were transferred from Denmark to the United States. Under Danish rule, the official language was Danish, but it was solely the language of administration and spoken by a tiny minority of Danes that primarily occupied administrative roles in colonial Danish West Indian society. However, place names and surnames from the Union Age of Denmark, Norway among natives still remain. Even during Danish ownership, Dutch was more common, at least during some of those 245 years, specifically on St. Thomas and St. John. Other languages included Irish, Scottish, English, Spanish and French, as well as Virgin Islands Creole English. Virgin Islands Creole English, an English-based Creole locally known as dialect, is spoken in informal situations. The form of Virgin Islands Creole spoken on St. Croix, known as Crucian, is slightly different from that spoken on St. Thomas and St. John. Because the U.S. Virgin Islands are home to thousands of immigrants from across the Caribbean, Spanish and various French Creole languages are also widely spoken. As of the 2000 census, 25.3% of persons over the age of 5 speak a language other than English at home. Spanish is spoken by 16.8% of the population, and French is spoken by 6.6%. Religion. Christianity is the dominant religion in the U.S. Virgin Islands. Protestantism is most prevalent, reflecting the territory's Dano-Norwegian colonial heritage. There is also a strong Roman Catholic presence. Rastafari is also prevalent. St. Thomas is home to one of the oldest Jewish communities in the Western Hemisphere, as Sephardic Jews began to settle the island in the 18th century as traders and merchants. The St. Thomas Synagogue in Charlotte Amalia is the second oldest synagogue on American soil and oldest in terms of continuous usage. Health. In 2010, the national average life expectancy was 79.61 years. It was 76.57 years for men and 82.83 for women. Education. The U.S. Virgin Islands Department of Education serves as the territory's education agency, and has 2 school districts: St. Thomas St. John's School District and St. Croix School District. The University of the Virgin Islands provides higher education leading to associate's, bachelor's, and master's degrees, with campuses on St. Thomas and St. Croix. Culture. The culture of the Virgin Islands reflects the various people that have inhabited the present-day U.S. Virgin Islands and British Virgin Islands, both despite the political separation having kept close cultural ties. The culture derives chiefly from West African, European and American cultures, in addition to the influences from the immigrants from the Arab world, India and other Caribbean islands. The island was also strongly influenced by the Dutch, French and Danish. During the periods of control the island were under these powers. After the U.S. Supreme Court's decision in Obergefell v. Hodges on June 26, 2015, which found that same-sex couples have a constitutional right to marry, same-sex marriage in the United States Virgin Islands is legal. On June 30, the Governor Kenneth Mapp announced that the territorial government would comply with the ruling. and on July 9 he signed an executive order that requires the territory's government to extend marriage rights to same-sex couples throughout the territory. Marriage tourism is a strong part of tourism in U.S. Virgin Islands, with couples flying in just for having the marriages in the islands. Music language. The official language of the U.S. Virgin Islands is English. However, Virgin Islands Creole is mainly spoken in informal, daily usage. Due to immigration from other Caribbean islands, usage of Spanish and various French Creoles have increased in the last few decades. Although the U.S. Virgin Islands was a Danish possession during most of its colonial history, Danish never was a spoken language amongst the populace, black or white, as the majority of plantation and slave owners were of Dutch, English, Scottish or Irish descent. Media. The islands have a number of AM and FM radio stations broadcasting music, religious, and news programming. Full and low-power television stations are split between St. Thomas and St. Croix. Newspapers include the Avis, printed daily on St. Croix; the Virgin Islands Daily News, printed daily on St. Thomas; St. John Tradewinds, distributed weekly on St. John; St. Thomas, St. John This Week, online only; St. Thomas Source, online only; St. Croix Source, online only; St. John on Island Times, news and information on St. John, U.S.V.I. Public holidays. January 1st, New Year's Day; January 6th, Three Kings Day; January, Martin Luther King, Jr. Day; February, President's Day; March 31st, Transfer Day; April, Holy Thursday, Good Friday, Easter Monday; May, Memorial Day; July 3rd, Emancipation Day; July 4th, U.S. Independence Day; September, Labor Day; October, Virgin Islands Puerto Rico Friendship Day, Columbus Day; November 1st, D. Hamilton Jackson Day; November 11th, Veterans Day; November, Thanksgiving Day; December 25th, Christmas; December 26th, Christmas Second Day. Virgin Islands government employees are also given administrative leave for St. Croix Carnival events in January and St. Thomas Carnival events in April, May.